It's no secret that since its release back in September, the Xyz summoning mechanic has, for lack of a better term, failed to take off as quickly as many had hoped for, at least in terms of a meta relevancy. But that doesn't mean you can't invest in Xyz deck right now, pilot to king games, do well in the KC Cup, or just have a ton of fun with the deck, and that's what today's video is all about. So I'm going to be breaking down my top 5 best Xyz decks in no particular order. Decks that are fun to play, that promote the best use cases so far of the mechanic in Duel Links. Now of course the term best is entirely subjective, don't believe me, just look at some of the decks on Duel Links Best Decks channel and come back to this video. All jokes aside, as this recording we're starting to see our first real tiered Xyz deck in the form of Noble Knights in the metagame. Now of course this is mainly due to the fact we have a new balance going live on the 15th, and of course the new support in the Tales of Noble Knight structure deck, which added some key cards to the archetype, like Merlin, that allows the deck to Xyz summon during the opponent's turn and start to disrupt the opponent's plays from there, before going in for game on your turn. However, I'm not including that in my top 5, since honestly, I'm not going to spend $20 or whatever it is on a deck I don't find fun to play, at least from my testing, so that's kind of my stance on Noble Knights. So let's dive into my list. Besides the gameplay, you'll find a few sample lists for builds you might want to try out, so let me know down below what you think is your favourite or your best Xyz deck, let me know down below. Hazes are both the newest and the oldest Xyz deck in the game, thanks to receiving the remainder of their support in the newest mini box, Rage of Volcano. And honestly, I think the best way of describing the deck is a glass cannon. At least if you're building the deck to solely focus on the new boss monster, Hazy Flame Basiltrice. Basiltrice is unique in that it gains effects based on the number of materials on the card, in addition to its once per turn banishing effect. And in this lies the deck's main downfall, especially in pure builds. If you have 3 or more materials, it gains attack for each one. If you have 4 more materials, it can't be targeted by card effects, and if you have 5 materials on it, it can't be destroyed by card effects. This is really counteractive to the whole Hazy mechanic. The rest of the archetype, all of them, have the passive effect that they can't be targeted by card effects, and is why back in the day, the deck was so good against cards like Enemy Controller. And so because Basiltrice only gains that effect at 4 materials, which the only way you're getting them onto the card is by using things like Hazy Pillar and Hazy Flame Hydra, your opponent has a very big window of opportunity where they can target it with things like Fiendish Chain, or shut it down with Floodgate Trap Hole before you can get to those bonuses. You can also play this deck in a variety of ways, some that don't really heavily rely on Basiltrice, running cards like the newly released Viking Avatar Varta, which you can summon with Hazy Sphinx, and purposely using Basiltrice for its banish effect only so you aren't investing everything into this one play that even if you do get 5 materials on, still loses out to a Sphere Kribo, Battle Traps like Wall of D, or especially an Invoked Purgatrio in terms of attack points. The plus side of course is the deck is incredibly free to play. Every card can be found in a new box, Sphinx is in the card trader, and Basiltrice is the only SR card, so it's a real budget option for those wanting some Xyz decks to play. I did not expect to have so much fun with the Onomatopoeia deck. First of all, if you're looking for a deck that will get support for eons to come, much like Heroes, this is it since it's based on the main bulk of Yuuma's extended support cards, which means we're looking at Gagagas, Gogogos, Superbars, and Dododos for this one. And much like almost every other deck on this list, there is just one correct way to play it. But it probably is the one that is most geared for future improvement, since of course as we get better generic Xyz monsters, the power ceiling and versatility of the deck only gets higher and higher, especially when you consider just how strong this deck's ability to sculpt your opening hand into whatever play you really need is. That's all thanks to Yuuma's skill Onomatoplay, which lets you trade in 2 Onomat cards from your hand to the deck to pick up any 2 cards from your deck and put them into your hand. Now the skill does say it wants you to choose cards with different names, but I've been sending back 2 copies of Gagaga Bolt, for example, so I'm not entirely sure what the deal is here, but this skill alone lets you have multiple lines of play for your first turn. If you think you're facing off against a deck that heavily relies on its normal summon, search up Golden Form and either Gogo Giant or Onomatopoeia to have an up to 4,000 attack wall that can negate an effect immediately, or search 2 level 4s to make a rank 4 Xyz turn 1. Know your opponent is playing a more battle heavy deck? Search out Gagaga Sister and Tsubaba Bancho to not only search out Gagaga Bolt to pop a card, but make the rank 6 Sword Break to have a Super Rush Headlong live on the field. Or you could go into Force Focus if you know your opponent runs a deck that relies on high level monster cards with effects to pop bounce cards. You'd want to be prepared for that situation. The deck can even make rank 5s like Adreus and Volcasaurus by choosing Utopic Onomatopoeia and Dododo Driver. It's an incredibly efficient main deck with access to a Pot of Greed in Dododo Draw, which can OTK quite easily, and has a ton of versatility to get into Xyz plays, and is a prime example of the unique benefits Duel Links' skill system provides to Xyz strategies. Shark Fang introduced to us a duo of really cool new battle heavy Xyz boss monsters in number 32 Shark Drake and 37 Hope Woven Dragon Spider Shark, the latter of which can drop at the attack of all monsters your opponent controls by 1000 during either player's battle phase, and floats to any card in your graveyard on destruction, and the former can detach Xyz material to revive the monster just destroyed with 1000 less attack points, and then attack it again. As I said, two very battle-heavy OTK cards that are incredibly fun to play with. And these were joined by a few new water-themed support cards, but perhaps the biggest support card of all was Shark's new skill, Territory of the Sharks. This skill lets you twice per duel change levels of all water monsters you control to level 4, as long as every monster in your deck and extra deck was a water attribute. So immediately that makes things like Spider Shark a lot easier to do. Unfortunately, if you missed out on Shark's unlock, then this deck will be kind of for you right now, since it's so reliant on the skill, but when it does come back around, you can then play it. But the skill doesn't just aid in Xyz plays. I've always had a bit of a soft spot for water-themed decks, especially the Atlantean cards, with Deep Sea Diva being some of my favourite strategies to play, and this skill turns your normal summon Diva into immediate access to a rank 4 Xyz or a level 8 Synchro, something you just can't do in a TCG. Which means if you detach Atlantean for the effect of Xyz monster, you'd also get a free back row from a pop depending on which one it is. Pretty neat interaction there. But because it makes level 8 Synchro so easy, it also makes things like Greydale infinitely more playable. Being able to use a Slime Jr. to go into a Greydale Dragon super easily, and then proceed to pop 2 cards its own effect, and then float into one of your biggest Xyzes like Spider Shark when destroyed, just opens up the floodgates for the deck's potential going forward. And if that line of play doesn't really float your boat, then people have also been using this skill with Mermails to make them a thing. That deck never really had the chance to shine in Duel Links, and now, through its new skill, they've been able to be seen in a brand new light, especially since they don't have all their support cards in the game just yet. And much like Onomat, this deck will benefit heavily from future rank 4 Xyz water cards if they ever come to Duel Links. Cards such as Bahamut Shark, Abyss Dweller, and Celadon Arc would be pretty crazy in this particular deck, so look forward to them. I'm sure some of you would have seen this coming, but this I think is the most interesting use of the Xyz monsters right now, and that's to help summon out fusion and synchro monsters. Spore plus the keys that goes in the graveyard skill plus Go Defender is insane, and you know that I've had that opinion for a while now. If you aren't aware, Akiza's skill lets you begin the duel with a copy of Dark Verge in your graveyard. This guy can special summon itself out when a plant tuner is summoned to your side of the field. So if you normal summon a Glow Up Bulb or a Spore, you now have enough levels for a level 3 synchro summon, in this case Go Defender, who can then special summon out another copy of himself. From here you then have a few different lines of play, and this core Spore plus skill combo can be teched into pretty much any different strategy. Deeper wind-up decks, Duel Links' own version of Chain Beat, Blue Eyes, Dark Magician, the list goes on and on. And I'll leave a link down below to Gazaris and Luke Tyler's videos on this deck if you want to learn more about those particular strategies. Now you could just resummon the Spore, go for level 9 synchro play and call it a day, that's perfectly valid, but you could also see somebody to the rank 3 wind-up carriers and Mighty, who could then once per turn detach material to summon a wind-up from your deck, which could be a Shark, Rabbit, or usually a wind-up Magician, who can then be used with a Spore in your graveyard to special summon to make a level 7 Fortune Lady every, for example, which isn't a bad turn 1 board. That's the turn 1 board of a Lightsworn player when you've only really used one card to go there. Or if you're a real 5-head, you could also run Miracle Synchro Fusion to end on an Ensure Trio or Go Emperor. If you opt to go down the wind-up route and banish the carrier, send them when he goes to the graveyard, etc., you could then get on those monsters, which basically means you would end up with an Xyz, a Fusion, and a Synchro, which is a kind of cool board to think about. It's kind of like DDDs. It's definitely a fun deck, or at least a fun little engine to take to certain decks where it makes sense to do so. Not every deck will integrate well with Spore, and giving up their skill in favour of what goes in the graveyard can be a pretty big blow to a deck. In cases like Blue Eyes, it can give you an alternative way to play the deck, and get into things like Spirit Dragon quite easily, but at the cost of not running alternative dragons, there's definitely things to weigh up there. One of the first Xyz decks to arrive in Duel Links alongside the Onomat strategy was Tellarknights. Now I must preface this that this deck is probably the weakest of the bunch when you exclude Hazy Flame, but it is the only real true Xyz deck that doesn't really rely on a skill to bring out the potential of the deck. So Tellarknights are a rank 4 Xyz spam deck that rely on main deck monsters with on-summon effects. Deneb lets you search a Teller from your deck to your hand, Altair specials you a Teller from your graveyard, Vega specials from the hand, and Unokalhai can send your Tellers from your deck to the graveyard to be used with Altair. So you can see there's a pretty clear line of play here. They also aim to control the board with cards like their trap cards still over Alpha, which sends a Teller you control to the graveyard to negate the activation of a card effect, destroys it, and lets you withdraw 1. As well as their main Xyz Deltaros, which requires 3 level 4 monsters to summon and can pop you a card every turn, stops your opponent from responding when you summon a monster, and when destroyed floats into another Tellarknight. So basically an Altair who special summons another one who gets you a Surge, you can see where this is kind of going. Being a rank 4 deck does bode well for future support, with not only more Talent Xyz monsters still to come, but also a plethora of generic rank 4 Xyz monsters, but right now, it's definitely still a King of Games contender deck, but not much more than that. It just perhaps relies too heavily on some external control cards like Sphere Kuriboh or Phoenix Chains to keep the deck from being completely blown out, which it can do easily. However, the deck along with Chain is all in one main box, so it's definitely not the most expensive deck to make, but in a way it also is, requiring at least 2 Denebs, which is the main box you are. But that is my list of my top 5 best Xyz decks in Duel Links in December 2020. Of course, I brought some out that aren't as good, some are good. These are the ones I find fun to play, that can reach King of Games, that are, you know, just fun use cases of the Xyz strategy in Duel Links that I think should be highlighted. And if you haven't got them yet, or if you do have them yet, give them a try, because I know you guys have been playing your Shiranuis, your Invoked on ladder, you've been using them because they're so good. When the meta changes on December 15th, which I believe is in 2 days time, why not give them a go? But let me down below what you think. You playing, Evil Swarms, Battling Boxers, Wind-Ups, they're all Xyz decks, they're all doing things, so just because they're on this list doesn't mean they're going to be not the best decks, and they can't not ever be the best deck, but to me, this is my top 5 picks. So thanks for watching, I'll see you all in the next Duel Links video, see you then.